Cao Part 5. After his death, Cao was posthumously titled Emperor Wu of Wei, literally meaning Martial King. He was allegedly buried in the Cao Mausoleum, also known as the Gaoling Mausoleum of Wei, or the Zi Gaozui Tomb No. 2. The discovery of this tomb was reported on December 27th in 2009 in Hainan Province. The burial site for Cao has remained a mystery, although his official biography states he was buried in the Gaoling Mausoleum, literally meaning High Mausoleum, around 1 month after his death. Many other rumours suggest he could have been buried elsewhere: Zhu City, below the Bronze Sparrow platform, a terrace in Yi City, or even beneath the Zhang River. Luo Guanzhong, the author of The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, popularized the legend that Cao had 72 tombs constructed to save his tomb from grave robbers. The 72 tombs were thought to have been discovered in Hebei, but archaeologists later confirmed that they had nothing to do with Cao. The Gaoling Mausoleum was discovered by workers who were digging for mud to make bricks. Initially, the tomb's discovery was not reported. It was only when local authorities arrested some grave robbers with a tablet labelled King Wu of Wei that its location became known. Throughout the following year, over 250 relics have been retrieved from the tomb, including paintings, stone tablets, sacrificial objects, and several items labelled personal belongings, which included weapons. The bones of 3 people were discovered and identified to be a man in his 60s, a woman in her 50s, and another woman in her 20s. Many experts and skeptics have pointed out problems and raised doubts about the tomb's authenticity. It's been highlighted that the relics could not be guaranteed as authentic, as grave robbers may have already greatly disturbed the tomb. It was also noticed that the most important piece of evidence, the artifact that reads King Wu of Wei, may have been deliberately placed there for deceptive purposes. It was later deduced that the artifacts were fake, as Cao could not be called King Wu of Wei before the year 220. After Cao's death as a vassal king, his son Cao Pi inherited the title. It would be considered taboo to bury Cao as King Wu of Wei, as the current King of Wei, Cao Pi, was still living then. Another piece of evidence that was presented highlighted discrepancies in the claim that Emperor Xian referred to Cao as King Wu of Wei. On September 12, 2010, it was announced that the tomb and the adjacent Zi Gaozui tomb No. 1 actually belonged to Cao Huan and his father Cao Yu, who was the son of Cao. The defining piece of evidence was when a seal was discovered and then presented, it was handed over upside down and then misread. Only when it was turned the right way did it read Huan, hence it has been deduced that it was Cao Huan's tomb. Archaeologists then compared the seal with that of Cao Ziyu's, and noticed that the Chinese characters bore some slight resemblance to the Chinese character Tao. Cao Huan also passed away at around the age 57, which is very close to the age of the man in the tomb. Excavation on the tombs was completed by the end of 2010, with over 400 artifacts and 100 damaged relics being recovered by the archaeologists. Despite conflicting ideas regarding the authenticity of the tomb, it is still regarded as Cao's. Some researchers believe that the remains of the older lady belonged to Lady Bian, as it's recorded she was also buried alongside Cao in the Gaoling Mausoleum, although Bian passed away in her 70s, and the remains have been identified as that of a 50-year-old. It's also thought that the remains of the younger female was a servant of theirs. Media reports from 2018 describe the tomb complex as having an outer rammed earth foundation, a spiritway, and structures on the east and south sides. Archaeologists have also noted that the tomb's exterior and perimeter appear to be deliberately left unmarked. There are neither structures above the ground around the tomb nor massive piles of debris in the vicinity. This indirectly confirms historical records that Cao Pi had ordered the monuments on the surface to be systematically dismantled to honour his father's wishes to be buried in a simple manner in a concealed location, as well as to prevent grave robbers from finding and looting the tomb. Another tomb was found next to Cao's that was built around the same time. This tomb, however, only had clothes in it and no remains, so experts believe it's that of Cao Ang's, whose body wasn't recovered after the Battle of Wancheng. The government began construction on the Cao Mausoleum Museum in 2010 to be open to the public. Whilst waging war against his enemies, Cao did not forget the basis of a society: agriculture and education. By the year 203, Cao passed a decree that put an official in charge of education within each of his cities. Each official was given 500 households and then tasked to select talented youngsters for schooling. This would increase the number of intellectuals in the coming years of war and, in Cao's words, would greatly benefit the people. The economic disruption caused by the Yellow Turban Rebellion was particularly severe for the farmlands. Then around 10 years later, in 194, a locust plague caused famine which further tormented and led to cannibalism amongst the people. To remedy this, although he did not invent the strategy itself, Cao famously reintroduced the Zhongtian system, a type of frontier or military agriculture colony. To begin with, he allowed refugees in Zhou and Shenliu to occupy wasteland in order to cultivate. He would later expand this to his military forces too, where soldiers who were off duty would turn uncultivated land into self-sustained settler colonies. It was under these conditions that Cao was able to reinstate the Zhongtian system, which greatly impacted China's economic revival. The methods implemented by Cao had peasants, refugees, and soldiers assigned plots of land. The required materials, such as ploughs and ox, were provided by the government at a low price. In exchange for these things, the farmers were required to hand over much of their seasonal harvest to the state. Cao's innovation of this system focused more on civilian Zhongtian and for soldiers during peacetime. With this, he successfully solved two great problems for his administration: a large number of unemployed refugees, who could then go on to fill vast areas of abandoned land. This system further aided Cao in his distant military campaigns, as he could sustain his armies over greater distances for longer periods of time. Despite going on to become arguably the most powerful dynasty of the time, Wei would be the second to fall when it was replaced by the Jin dynasty in 265. In the year 263, Wei is estimated to have a population of around 4.4 million and over 600,000 families. Cao's household was teeming with wealth and properties, with proud horses in groups. At the time when Cao warred against Dongzhuo but lost his horse at night, Cao Hong gave him his horse. It was called White Swan, sometimes written as White Crane. At Bian River, Cao Hong could not cross on foot, so looked for a ferry. It's been written that Cao invited Hong onto the horse for a mutual ferrying, so they travelled several hundreds of li, and in the blink of an eye they arrived at their destination. People say the hairs on the horse's legs were not even wet, and that it was riding the winds to travel, just another mighty steed of the era. Legend tells when this horse was running, the rider would only hear the sound of the wind, as the horse's legs were moving so fast it was as if it was not trampling the ground. A proverb tells of this horse, up to the air it leaps, Cao clan's White Swan. The Book of Wei states that the horse His Excellency was riding in the war against Jiang Shih was called Shadow Runner. It was hit with stray arrows, injuring him through the cheek and foot. This was at the point where Cao was also wounded in his right arm. Cao Ang soon arrived though to help his father. He was also injured and unable to ride, and so he led his horse to Duke Cao, allowing him to escape, whilst Ang stayed behind and perished. The Cao Man Zhuan, translated as the Biography of Cao Man, or the Biography of Cao the Concealer, was written by an unnamed subject of the Wu Kingdom. The Cao Man Zhuan only remains in fragments, and it's thought that the word man refers to Cao Cao's infant name of Man. Pei Songzhi and Chen Shou both cited these records, although the latter described it as a hostile piece of propaganda. Within this text is where the famous quote, "Among men, Lu Bu, among horses, red hair," comes from. It also pushes the claim that Cao Song was the younger brother of Zia Hadun's father, and that Cao and Dun were of the same clan. Within the Cao Man Zhuan, Cao is described as follows. The great ancestor was a carefree and amiable person, lacking in severity, and he enjoyed music, keeping musicians and performers close by, and frequently would employ them from sun up to sundown. He wore clothing of light silk, and on his own person he wore a small belt pouch that used for holding his handkerchief and small items. On occasion, he put on a cap when appearing before guests. Often he would join people in discussion and tease them by means of poems read aloud. He gave it his all, without concealing anything, until he was so joyous and mirthful that he was in convulsions, even up to the point of his hat falling off and his cup falling onto the table. And when eating meat dishes, in every case he soiled his hat. His frivolity and lightness were thus. However, his wielding of the law was stern and severe. If any of his generals were persons who reckoned themselves as surpassing him, then he accorded with them the law and executed them, to the point that old friends and old enemies, in either case, there were none left. For such persons being punished by death, he would always face them with a head lowered in tearful lamentation for them, but in the end, none were spared. Earlier, when Yuan Zhong was Chancellor of Pei State, it was his desire to use the law to rein in the great ancestor. Additionally, Yuan Shou of Pei State belittled him, and when they were in Yan province, Bian Rang of Chen Liu spoke his opinion that they should oppress the great ancestor. So the great ancestor killed Rang and executed his family. Zhong and Shou both took refuge in Jiao province, and so the great ancestor immediately tasked the Grand Administrator, Shih, with totally eradicating them. Yuan Shou was captured and brought forth as the leader, kowtowing and apologizing before the imperial court, but the great ancestor said, "To kneel is fitting for the death of a wicked man," and straightway executed him. Once he had led the army and was passing by a field of grain. He gave an order saying that soldiers are not to damage the grain and that violators will be executed. The cavalrymen all got down from their horses so as to restrain them from not going over the grain, whereupon the great ancestor's horse went galloping into it, so he had the Master of Records come talk over his infraction. The Master of Records answered him, according to the meaning found in the Spring and Autumn Annals, that punishment is not to be imposed upon a superior. The great ancestor said, "I have laid out the law, and myself have transgressed it, but how is a commander to submit? It is true that I act as the commander of the army and cannot commit suicide, so I ask for myself to be punished." For this reason, his assistants used a sword to shear off his hair so that it fell onto the earth. Once there was a concubine who routinely served him as he rested during the day, and he laid his head on his pillow to sleep and spoke to her, saying, "In a short while, come wake me up." The concubine, seeing the great ancestor was sleeping peacefully, did not wake him up, and when he himself awoke, he struck and killed her with a staff. He frequently went on campaigns against bandits, and the government grain stores were deficient, so he secretly went to the supply master and said, "What is to be done?" The supply master answered, "We can use the fewest hu of grain needed," to which Tao replied, "Perfect." Afterward, those within the army were saying that the great ancestor was deceiving the men, so he spoke to the supply master saying, "I single you out to act as a pretext for me and be killed to satiate the men, lest the enterprise fall apart." He thereupon beheaded him, and taking the head and exposing it in public, he said, "He dispensed few hu of grain and stole from the government granary, so I beheaded him at the army gates." The unknown author of this text describes Cao Cao in this way. Such did he cruelly and viciously deceive, and in all things he behaved the same as this. Cao was an accomplished poet, along with his sons Tao Pi and Tao Zhi. Known collectively as the Three Taos, their works and the contributions of others helped shape the Jianan style. This style is known for its passionate expression of grief for how life lasted for a very short time during this period. The Jianan style took characteristics from folk songs or ballads, with its use of uneven line lengths or irregular lines. Tao has specifically been noted for his ballad-style verse which he set to music. He has also been credited as the only writer of the period who succeeded in infusing the older four-character structure with any vitality. As it is claimed, he did away with the archaic wording and replaced it with ordinary poetic language from his time. Of his works, only remnants still remains. Arguably his most celebrated is one part of a four-part poem titled Steps Through the Illustrious Gate. It was written during the Battle of White Wolf Mountain, and this part is known as Though the Tortoise Lives Long. Though the tortoise blessed with magic powers lives long, its days have their allotted span. Though winged serpents ride high on the mist, they turn to dust and ashes at the last. An old war horse may be stabled, yet still it longs to gallop 1,000 li. And a noble-hearted man, though advanced in years, never abandons his proud aspirations. Man's span of life, whether long or short, depends not on heaven alone. One who eats well and keeps cheerful can live to a great old age, and so with joy in my heart I hum this song. Another of Cao Cao's well-known poems is named Short Song Style. I lift my drink and sing a song, for who knows if one's life is short or long. Man's life is like morning dew, past days many, future days few. The melancholy in my heart begets, comes from cares I cannot forget. Who can unravel these sorrows of mine? I know of only one man, the god of wine. Disciples dressed in blue, my heart worries for you. You are the cause of this song, without pause. Across the banks a deer bleats, in the wilds where it eats. Honoured guests I salute, strike the drums and play the flute. Bright is the moon's sparkle, will there be a time it can be grasped? Thoughts of you from deep inside, never settling, never ceasing. Friends drop by via a country road, the respect they pay really show. A long due reunion we fest, sharing past stories we possessed. The moon outshines the sparse stars, the crows fly to the south. Circling the tree 3 times, on what branch a rest can they find? Mountains do not despise height, seas do not despise depth. The sage pauses when guests call, so at his feet the empire does fall. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.